Happy Wednesday and welcome back to the Wolff Den presented by Win Again Academy. Mark Moyer doing some great things with his In the Club Room events. They have another special event June 1 and 2. It's a master class session with Sarah Colwart about trying to find your dream job. So check out winagainacademy.com for more information. Again, June 1 and 2. I am Matt Wolff, founder and CEO of Ticket Time Machine. Today we have Richard Hiskey as our guest. Welcome to the Wolff Den, Richard.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great to have you on here. For those of our audience who don't know who you are, give us just a quick introduction of who you are and what you're doing.
Great. So I am a beach volleyball agent, basically working with high-profile professional beach volleyball athletes, both internationally and domestically. Our company focuses mostly on aligning those athletes with brands to create organic partnerships / sponsorships. Pretty exciting space for me. I've been involved in beach volleyball in some capacity since I was a student at UCLA in the late 70s. I was never good enough of a player to make any money at it, so now I live vicariously through those around the world who are and do. So I founded my own agency to focus on beach volleyball in 2014, and recently have grown to the point where I've merged with another agency called KVA Sports to better manage our clients. So that's the 60-second summary.
Yeah, well, the beach volleyball scene it's a lot bigger now than it was back in the day, even with regards to college teams being involved, and now with Olympics and all of that. It's a pretty big sport compared to when it was when you were playing, correct?
Oh, absolutely. It's grown from kind of a bragging rights. You might win a 12-pack of Coors Light for winning a big tournament to now the best players in the world actually make a nice living on prize money alone. I believe the count now, Matt, is over 100 NCAA schools, D1 and other divisions, offer beach volleyball as a scholarship sport for women. So the words that I never thought would come out of my mouth, you can go to USC, UCLA, Florida State, TCU, and 75 plus other high profile schools on a scholarship to be a beach volleyball player, which is just very, very cool. There's a defined pipeline for women to compete in the Olympics and possibly on one of the professional tours after they graduate. So I've seen that grow from in the last 2 or 3 decades to a very, very definable pipeline for women, and hopefully the men's opportunity will be forthcoming.
So the U.S. is pretty dominant in that sport, correct?
Not as much as we once were. You can argue about where the sport was actually invented. Some say Hawaii, some say Southern California. But for the first, I would say, 2 Olympic cycles, the U.S. was dominant. So right now, if you were to look at the top ranked men's team in the world, they're from Norway, believe it or not. And the top 2 ranked women's teams in the world, one is from the United States and the other is from Canada. So it is truly a worldwide sport. People in Brazil are as passionate about beach volleyball, if not more so, than people here in the United States. So it is truly a global sport.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, it's one of the events in the Summer Olympics definitely that I like to tune into. Some pretty exciting stuff. I remember this part was probably 2 Olympics ago with Misty May.
Yes.
Was that 2 Olympics ago?
Yes.
Because they're retired, right? I think she had a kid.
Yes, Misty has been retired for a few years. She married a pro baseball player named Matt Trainer, and they have a family. Misty is still very much involved in the sport as a coach, but she and her partner, Carrie, Walsh, Jennings, who is still competing, won 3 Olympic gold medals. Their last was in London in 2012.
And so the reason for the college is not like the Gators don't have a beach volleyball, but they also don't have a men's regular volleyball. It's Title IX type stuff.
Yes.
But is there enough talent to become more mainstream, to have 200 schools?
Depending on whose statistics you want to listen to, Matt, I believe this was the 5th season where it was a fully sanctioned sport for women on the NCAA side with a Final Four. It's always held in Gulf Shores, Alabama, the first weekend of May. From its beginnings as a non-sanctioned sport, and technically this is a fun little sidebar, we were not allowed to call it beach volleyball because so many of the schools who were participating were landlocked. They didn't have beaches, so we had to call it sand volleyball. So once we became a fully sanctioned sport, we were able to say beach volleyball. So anyways, it apparently has been the fastest growing NCAA sport from inception to this point of any other sport. So it's growing like crazy. I believe it's now well over 100 schools have beach volleyball as a scholarship sport for women.
And I know in the Olympics it's 2-person. Is that the same? Is it always 2-person?
Yes. On the beach side, it is doubles. So you have a blocker and a defender. They play different configurations, but there's only 2 players on a court.
Why haven't they extended that to like 6 players and have like team volleyball almost?
6-man or 6-woman has traditionally been an indoor sport.
Right.
There are high-profile events kind of on an exhibition basis that the players really enjoy playing. One is the Manhattan Beach 6-man, which is typically held in early August, and it is just like a week-long party. It's really, really fun. Everybody enjoys doing that. But as far as a professional sport, there is a fledgling 4-person tour that's been trying to catch a little momentum. But right now, just worldwide, it's doubles, 2 persons per side.
And how did you get into beach volleyball?
One of my childhood friends ended up getting a scholarship to UCLA to be an indoor volleyball player, and we were roommates for a couple of years on campus. And I ended up learning the beach game from him and a couple of the other guys that we roomed with who played on the volleyball team. They would train at the beach during summertime. And a couple of the other guys who were on the UCLA team at that time would be on, if there was such a thing as a Mount Rushmore of beach volleyball players, a couple of these guys would be on there for sure. Carrie is one. He's currently the head coach of the U.S. Women's Olympic team. And the other would be St. John Smith, who is kind of a legend of the sport as well. So I kind of learned the game watching those guys play. Just wish I could compete at their level.
Probably the only 2 names I knew.
There you go. 2 good ones. If you only need to know 2, those are 2 really good ones.
Because and
you knew Misty May Trainer too. That's 3.
Yeah, there was a video game, I think, with volleyball, and I feel like I played with them. The 2 of them. Also, the movie Side Out.
Side Out, of course.
It's a great movie. Great, one of those like low budget, great movies. I love that movie. Are there any other good beach volleyball movies?
That's the one every kind of points to. And a fun little sidebar, when I had just finished graduate school before I started going to work for Fox Sports, I poked around the entertainment industry as a background actor. And one of the movies I worked on was a film with C. Thomas Howell as the star, who was the star of Side Out. Yeah. So I'd always talk to him off set about beach volleyball and stuff. He's very, very gracious and super cool guy. So that's my C. Thomas Howell Side Out story.
Was it Soul Man?
No, it was called, oh gosh, I'm going to bonk on the name of it. It's been so long ago. Of course, I'll think about it as soon as we go out there. But
those are 2. I love those 2 movies, Soul Man and Side Out. Great. C. Thomas Howell did some great movies back in the day. What would possess someone to? I guess that's the wrong phrase. Why would someone want to play beach or indoor? What's the difference if you're looking at it from a perspective of how far can I go? Is there a path that's, I don't want to say easier because none of these are easier. You're talking about the top 1% in the world.
Yes. That's a really, really good question, Matt. And on the indoor side, if you were to take somebody and just move, this person's a really, really good blocker or spiker or setter or defender. And if you were to move that person out to the beach, it's so different. It's almost a completely different sport. The basic skill set is the same, But on the beach side, since there's only two persons on the court at a time, you can't have any weaknesses. You have to be able to use all the skills, where indoors, you can tend to specialize a little bit more. Because if your opponents realize that even though you're 6'7", and your partner might be have better ball control, you're going to see every serve, which is going to expose any weaknesses possibly. So it gets exposed very, very quickly. So you have to have it all around well-rounded game. The other consideration is for both men and women, mostly on the men's side now, but there's no professional indoor league in the United States. So what the best players do is they tend to go sign contracts to play overseas, be it in Italy, Greece. There are lots of the European countries specifically have very, very well-run indoor leagues, and they're allowed to have 2, maybe 3 expatriates per team on their roster. So that friend of mine who I mentioned from UCLA, he actually went and played professionally in Italy after he finished school at UCLA and then got into coaching.
And so it's playing college. If you're the best of the best, maybe play overseas. Not that different from, say, basketball, but possibly make the tryout for the U.S. team. If you're
Correct.
If you're indoor,
Yes.
if you're outdoor, play. There's leagues out there, and then also it's now an Olympic. How many teams can qualify?
For the Olympics, on the beach side, you would probably need an advanced degree in computer science, IT, or mathematics to figure out the Olympic qualifying formula. But the real short version is no more than 2 teams per country go, and per gender. So it looks like the U.S. will be able to send 2 teams to Tokyo later this year per gender. But you also have to be in the top 15 in the world rankings. So if one of your 2 teams isn't in the top 15 in the world, you don't get that second invitation. So that's kind of the long and short of it. Interestingly enough, the Olympic qualifying period typically starts about 18 months before the Olympics. And due to COVID, we had the Olympics delayed a year.
Yeah.
So the teams, there's about 3 teams on the men's side and 4 teams on the women's side vying for those 2 spots to go to Tokyo to be Team USA. And they've been at it for 2.5 years, battling it out for international points to see who team our USA will send to the Olympics in Tokyo.
So it's a cumulative point instead of hey, this is a qualifying tournament.
It is a combination of those 2 things. The FIVB, which is the International Beach Volleyball Federation, has a series of events that they run that offer qualifying points. You have to play in at least 12 of those events within the qualifying period, which in this case has been like 2.5 years. The way it works is they take your best 12 finishes within that time frame, add up the points, that's who goes. So you have to, if you have a real, let's say you took a 30 seconds somewhere in Cancun, and when the next tournament in Russia, which starts tomorrow, you end up in 3rd place, you can take that 12th place finish, throw it out, put in the 3rd place finish, and that increases your point total. So that's the long and short of it.
Yeah, I like that model. It allows you to just say, hey, if you play and you do well, take away a couple of bad ones. They do that in some of the Olympics too, don't they? Take away your best and worst score.
Yes, and there's some kind of averaging that goes on, but it's very, very convoluted. To get into some of these qualifying tournaments, you have to have what's called entry points.
Right.
So believe it or not, we had 2 men's teams from the U.S. who flew over to Sochi, Russia, which is on the Black Sea. They had to play off against each other. So the 2 men's teams played off against each other yesterday. The winner of that event get to play in the qualifying event, which is today. Okay. Then they have to win 2 matches to get into the actual tournament, which starts tomorrow. So you could, in theory, fly to Russia, play 1 match, which typically takes about an hour, and be done. You go, well, okay, now we got to come home.
Do some sightseeing. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
I hear Russia's, take away all the other stuff. I hear Russia's a beautiful place to visit. I hope to get there someday.
Same. It's on my bucket list, and hopefully some of the athletes I work with will continue on their trajectory, and I'm looking forward. My partner and I definitely want to go to Paris in 2024 with some of our athletes and support them there. And then, of course, the Olympics are in Los Angeles in 2028. So that's 45 minutes up the road for us.
There you go.
Yeah.
So one of your guys, Taylor Crabb, is in Russia now, trying to qualify.
Yes. So Taylor and his partner Jake Gibb are one of the three teams vying for two spots on the men's side. They are currently tied for first place with a multi-Olympian named Phil Dalhouser and his partner Nick Lucena, who are from Florida. So over on your side of the country. And then, ironically, the third team in the running is a couple of guys from Hawaii, Tri Bourne and Trevor Crabb, who is Taylor's older brother.
Right.
So we could have two brothers going to the Olympics on different teams, or we could have one of them staying home. So we won't know. The Olympic qualifying period ends on June 13th. So we have the tournament in Russia. And then after that tournament, they go to Ostrava, which is in the Czech Republic. And once that tournament is done, that's the end of the qualifying period. They sort out the numbers, and we'll know who goes.
So they really, as they're playing, don't know, just keep winning. Do they have an idea of what they need to do? Or
yes, it's like towards the end of a baseball season when you get all those permutations and calculations about, okay, we need to win the next 3 games. The team behind us has to lose, and you kind of get that. It keeps narrowing down. It's at that. It's at kind of we're there. So it's just like any other sport, though, Matt. If you don't worry too much about the teams behind you, you just handle your own business, finish as high as possible, and things just sort of work themselves out. And we send the best 2 teams per gender, which is good. It's the way it should be.
Yeah, that's I think it's the way it should be. So hopefully Taylor will make it. Love to obviously see his brother get there also. Have they ever played together?
Yes, they actually did. When they both turned professional in about 2015, they did play together. And that was pretty cool because we had sometimes the brands like to have a team to work with. But for a variety of reasons, the guys split up, I want to say maybe 2016, 2017. They're obviously brothers and, love each other, but sometimes you just need to separate things a little bit. So we like to tease them because when they split up, they each picked up former Olympians as partners. Trevor started playing with a guy from Hermosa Beach named Sean Rosenthal, who's played in multiple Olympics for the U.S. And Taylor went to Jake Gibb, who, assuming they make it to Tokyo to represent Team USA, it will be Jake Gibb's 4th Olympics. Wow. And Jake has already announced his retirement after the Olympics. So just want to see him go out on a real high note. Great guy and just a fantastic international ambassador for the sport.
Yeah, that would be great. How do you pick the partner, and how often does it change? Obviously, if Taylor's going to have to find a new partner, but in tennis, it seems like a little different in tennis because sometimes you just there's people who are doubles players like the Bryan brothers.
Yes,
who were together, and that's all they played. And then you got Serena teaming up with she teamed up with Venus sometimes, but you have great players who are teaming up with each other who aren't necessarily a team, but they enter into the doubles competition. So in volleyball, how often do people change partners?
Volleyball partnerships tend to be a little bit on the fickle side, but I really like your tennis analogy, the Bryan brothers and Williams sisters. It's certainly a lot of it is chemistry. How do you get along on the court? You have to have a short memory. Okay, we didn't play well that point. Let's forget about that. Let's get the next one, and that just has to be the mindset. Strategically, what most of the teams do is they have a blocker and a defender. So in Taylor and Jake's case, Taylor is about 6 feet tall. His partner Jake Gibb is about 6'9". So Jake is kind of the front row guy, and Taylor just moves around the backcourt as a defender. And that strategy works very, very well for them. I tease people who are just kind of learning the sport. I go, you've never seen a human being move as fast as Taylor can in the sand. It's a lot of it is just being a volleyball IQ. He reads the shot and knows where to start moving in time, but he's also really, really fast and extremely coordinated and great ball control. So it's fun to watch him play. Now, Trevor and Trevor being Taylor's older brother, they are both about 6'4", 6'5". So they do what's called split blocking. Whoever serves the ball, typically the other player is the blocker. And then when they rotate serves, then they rotate positions. So they kind of split. Sometimes they're defender, sometimes there's the blocker. And that strategy has worked really, really well for those two, simply because they kind of grew up playing volleyball together in Hawaii. So that's kind of two separate strategies. Most often you see the blocker defender, the team from Norway that I mentioned earlier, the #1 team in the world. They have a blocker who's about Jake's size. He's about 6'7", 6'8".
Wow.
And the defender is about 6 foot, about Taylor's size. But, I was still tickled. Like, Norway is just not the first place I think of when I think of beach volleyball powerhouse. I think of U.S., Brazil, etc. But hey, these guys are awesome.
How good is the USA going to be in this Olympics, men and women's? Do we have a chance to medal? Are we expected to be competitive?
Absolutely. It's kind of one of those anything can happen scenarios. Because the way it works in the Olympics, I believe it's the top 16 teams actually enter the event, as opposed to 32 teams in a typical, like the event in Russia. I believe the main draw has 32 teams. So it's just kind of the best of the best will be competing in Tokyo, starting in July, late July. I believe that Taylor and Jake and Phil Dahlhauser and his partner Nick Lucena are both currently ranked number 9 in the world. And I believe Trevor and Tri are ranked 14th. So there is certainly a shot for all three of them, depending on which two teams we send on the men's side to medal. And of course, I have a vested interest in Taylor's career, and I've actually worked with Trevor in the past as well, and hope to do so again in the near future. On the women's side, the equation is a little bit more defined. There is a multi-Olympian named April Ross, who I believe has won a bronze medal in Rio with Carrie, Walsh, Jennings. Mm-hmm. And then I think she took a silver in the 2012 Olympics. So she's extremely experienced and arguably one of the top 5 players in the world on the women's side. She and her partner, Alex Kleinman, have already locked up the first spot for the U.S. And they kind of flip-flop with a team from Canada as to who's the #1 rated team in the world, who's number 2, and they have for about the last year. So they are probably, if you want to try to handicap things, they are probably in the favorites to medal on the women's side. And then, believe it or not, Carrie Walsh Jennings, this would be, if she qualifies to take the spot for the second team, it'll be her 6th Olympics. 5 as a beach player, and then she was on the indoor team on the Sydney Olympics in 2000. So she is, again, she would be on that hypothetical Mount Rushmore of beach volleyball athletes. She's still extremely competitive. Some of the women she's trying to beat out for that last spot are, Carrie might even be old enough to be their mom. I mean, she's just a phenomenal athlete.
Yeah, it's remarkable stories that come out of the Olympics with just the longevity of a career in a sport that doesn't necessarily it's not normal, right? I was trying to figure out which there was a story I wanted to post today on LinkedIn about like women empowerment, and I couldn't remember what it was. And now you just reminded me, it was this 32-year-old mom who went back and tried out and participated in the Olympic trials in gymnastics.
Oh, okay.
For the last week. That was the story. So now I'll have to save that for next week. But yeah, it's unbelievable. Tom Brady coming and playing, and some of these people who just continue to just push the limits of what people think. A 32, and that's not an old by any stretch, right? 32, but. Right. in some sports and gymnastics, that's ancient. And, you start talking about in tennis and some of these other sports, that's tough to have to run around the beach, endurance, even in volleyball. Yeah, it's impressive just to even to have a chance to be there.
Yes.
So kudos
in fact,
to her.
One of the teams that is vying with Carrie and her partner Brooke Sweat for that second spot to represent us in Tokyo. A little fun subtext there. Player's name's Kelly Clays, who is from USC. Won multiple national championships there, and her partner is Sarah Sponsel, who won multiple national championships at UCLA. So they battled against each other in NCAA beach volleyball, and now they're partners trying to knock Carrie Walsh Jennings, the legend, out of a spot to represent the United States in the Olympics. So it's almost a passing of the torch type of scene. On the women's side, the women's pipeline, as you imagine, just because of the NCAA involvement, is very defined. So you can look at the three teams looking for that second spot in the Olympics and kind of see the future of women's beach volleyball in the United States. And there's players coming up out of college that are ready to just step right in and compete and make it to probably Sunday's events on the AVP side. Like right now, they're that good. On the men's side, the best players, most recognizable names are all 35 plus, with the exception of the Crab brothers and Tri Bourne, Trevor's partner. Phil Dalhouser, Nicholas Senna, Jay Gibb are all looking, they're looking towards the end of their careers, and hopefully they can go out on a high note with an Olympic medal in Tokyo. But then on the men's side, we just can't look at too many teams behind them to say, okay, here's the next Phil Dalhouser coming up through the feeder system. There just isn't one that I can think of. But hopefully that will sort itself out here as more and more people get involved in beach volleyball. Once we get some events happening again, hopefully the AVP, our dominant domestic tour, will be announcing their 2021 schedule. Be a truncated schedule. Maybe they typically have 8 events. Maybe it'll be half of that.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of an odd year just because of the Olympics. The Olympics kind of conflict with a couple of the Southern California events during an Olympic year. So we'll see how they maybe can move some dates around to attract we certainly don't want to miss having Taylor and Jake play at the Manhattan Beach Open because they're playing in the Olympics type of thing. So we'll see if they can tweak some dates a little bit, hopefully. But I'll let you know as soon as the AVP announces their schedule.
Yeah, it's looking forward to that. How do you get the sport to grow? I mean, you have women's in college. There's no men's college, right?
No, not. There's club sport.
Right.
Beach volleyball was a club sport for men in college, but no, just women at this point.
It's one of those things you can't go to the beach without seeing people play volleyball. So how do you grow this sport?
Well, especially where you are in Florida and me in Southern California, there's just everywhere you look, there's just beach volleyball courts up and down the coast. So that's really a good question, Matt, and very thought-provoking. The AVP, which has been the dominant pro tour in the U.S. for decades, is under new ownership as of about, I want to say maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And the new owner is an extremely shrewd businessman, very, very smart, and he's growing his tour very strategically. At one point back in the 80s, mid to late 80s, there I think maybe 24 stops on the AVP tour. So players could earn significant amounts of money. I think, if I recall, maybe in the late 80s, maybe 88. You had to go maybe to number 12 on the money list on the men's side for somebody who did not earn 100,000 plus in prize money, and that's 1988. Okay. So that's again 24 events with major sponsors involved, like Cuervo, Toyota, Crocs. So there's just really no major sponsors like that involved in the sport yet. But the owner of the AVP is growing the business very slowly, strategically, organically, and Very impressed with what he's done. And hopefully we will get back to the point where you could actually earn a nice living as a professional beach volleyball player just with your prize money. I think I could name about maybe this many people, maybe 5 or 6 who are in that spot right now, at least in the U.S.
But the beach volleyball lends itself to sponsorship very well. You're very visible, right? You see the body. You're not covered by much. I guess there's space that's missing on a jersey if you're wanting to put it, but so the obvious stuff like sunglasses and sports drinks. What are some of the outside the box stuff that you look for with regards to sponsorship for your players?
Some of the things that my partner and I are working on now are to get those non-endemic beach volleyball brands that you kind of mentioned some of them right off the top there, like the Gatorades or Oakleys that work with some of the tours and some of the players directly. My dream, Matt, would be to walk into a Chase Bank and, there's the thing over there, the little stand-up deal when there's Serena Williams, and then I'm waiting in line, and then I glance up at the screen, and there's Taylor Crabb up on the screen being sponsored by Chase Bank. Why not? So our goal is to go after those non-endemic beach categories and get them interested in the sport. Why not? What is very cool is my partner, as I mentioned, is a professional baseball agent working with athletes here and in Japan. So he brings with him a pretty impressive Rolodex of brand connections, equal if not exceeding my own. And the fun thing for me is I may get to cross over and work with some baseball players too. And I played baseball up right to college and just decided, I went out and looked at the UCLA team, and there were some guys that I played with in high school that were walking on, and they were so much better than me. I think I just became a full-time student. Thus ended a great baseball career. But anyways, so that's back to, we're looking for maybe car deals, quick serve restaurants. Why not the, Chipotle or somebody with a healthy menu working with a professional beach volleyball athlete. These guys and gals have transitioned from being just kind of a party sport the way it was when I played. You'd play all day, you'd jump in the ocean, you go have a few beers and stay up all night, and then you come back out the next day and do it again. And you basically did it for fun. Now these are hardcore professional athletes. I mean, they train, they have personal trainers, they have nutritionists, they have massage therapists. This is their job, this is their profession, and they look at it that way. So anything I can do to help them on the brand side, the business side. I tell Taylor he's like the Formula One race car driver. My partner Kurt and I are kind of like the pit crew, working behind the scenes to put him in a position to not have to worry about the business stuff. Let us handle that. You focus on getting yourself to the Olympics, and the way that bodes well for all of us.
And certainly winning helps, right? These brands
absolutely
want winning. They get to play more. They get more TV time.
Yes.
Visibility. But sex sells, right? And so in beach volleyball, you're out there and, in some provocative outfits for men and women's. I know there was probably more attention on the women's. I think there was something about the Olympics, and which is fine. They're out there. They have to wear that outfit anyway. So it's not, it's you have to embrace that sort of thing. Does that make it harder or easier? I mean, what is that? How does that impact the men's and women's with regards to saying you have to kind of look a certain way to play? Not that you have to, if you're good enough, you're going to, but it just seems that's who's out there.
Yeah, that's again a great observation, Matt. And what we share with a lot of brands is, these are remarkably fit individuals, essentially working in very little clothes. I mean, the guys just wear board shorts, and the women wear bikinis. On the international side, if you were to watch some of the footage from, it's on, I think, volleyballworld.com on YouTube. There, you'll see the tournament in Russia. They actually wear a jersey top, and the women's wear like a sports bra that has branding on it from the FIVB and their partners. So some of the challenges we face is, the great news is these are remarkably fit human beings working basically in nothing. But there's not a lot of inventory space to put a logo places. So we get kind of creative with that stuff. There are temporary tattoos. You'll see a lot of the international players. It's almost like looks like an armband that a soccer referee would wear that would have like Mikasa on it or Oakley or whatever. So we use those. I mean, you kind of touched on it in your lead in there, but in my view, Matt, there's kind of three criteria. There is, well, this is kind of when I present an athlete to a brand, is like, how do they compete in their tournaments? What does their social media look like? Do they, good posts, organic, lots of engagement? How many followers do they have, et cetera? How often do they post? That sort of stuff. And then the third part, which sometimes is the most important, is just that X factor. I mean, is this person likable? Do people want to work with them? It's a little bit harder to define, but if all three of those elements exist, I mean, that's kind of the dream scenario. So trying to put the partnerships together is actually kind of fun. So I always look for those three elements whenever I'm considering, approaching an athlete about representation. Is like, okay, I followed the sport very, very closely for a long time, and I kind of know who we want to align ourselves with for a variety of reasons, and some maybe not so much. But those are, again, the criteria we look at. And back to your point about it's difficult, we kind of go away from the old, well, where can we put a logo on this human being? We don't want Taylor looking like a NASCAR, but if you want your logo on his board shorts next to his name on the left leg, you want to be on the right leg. Okay, that's inventory. That's got value. Let's talk about that. You want a social media post about your brand every other week? Okay, cool. We can do that. So it's just gotten a little bit more creative. And we don't even really use the word sponsorship as much anymore. It's more like partnerships. Sponsorship to me connotes, throw me some money and we'll hope for the best. Partnership is, okay, the brand needs to be able to tie this back somehow to sales, to their management, to justify the investment in the athletes. So we make sure we honor our end of the agreement, making sure we post and do whatever we agree to in the contract.
Yeah, I still think it's sponsorship, but there's ways to add value and make it not just a paid advertising, which is different. So sponsorship to me has that partnership and
exactly
not paid advertising. But I just say, I'm not a fan of using the word partnership when it is more sponsorship, because I'm looking for partners. But that's for a whole nother conversation. You can read my article on LinkedIn to hear my opinion on that. But no, it's good to be able to share to be able to grow a brand because of who they are. Are you an influencer? I don't know. I'm not crazy about that. Do I need to wear Oakleys just because Taylor wears Oakleys? No, but he does look cool in them, right? I mean, that's part of what Oakleys are. Is they're a cool looking. It's a look, right? There's plenty of glasses out there that have great functionality, and I know Oakley does have that also. But there's a look to it that everyone understands that Oakley's is just a cool looking sunglasses.
Yes, and in fact, there's working with athletes directly, like in Oakley and Taylor, is an opportunity for Oakley to get huge exposure in the beach volleyball space without having to become a sponsor of individual tours that the athletes compete on. So one of the cool things about the beach volleyball space is typically the athletes can have their own sponsors, even if they conflict with some of that tour's sponsors. So
I was going to say, what about your partner's sponsor?
And that was where it gets interesting too. It's not unusual for once you get kind of to Taylor and Jake's level, you can kind of have some reciprocity. For example, Taylor and Jake are sponsored by Lululemon for their apparel, but that was Jake's original sponsorship. That once he started partnering with Taylor, they kind of brought Taylor in and grandfathered him into that deal. So that's pretty cool. But at some of the other levels of competition, you see the players are supposed to have matching apparel, but not literally matching. It just has to be color-wise. They can't be clashing. But you might see one player wearing Rock's volleyball gear and the other is wearing Quicksilver or something like that. But once you kind of get up the ranks a little bit, everybody wants to work with teams.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of opportunity out there. It'd be impossible to just have to say, oh, you have to support both of these athletes. It's not going to happen, especially if you're switching athletes all the time. It just doesn't seem reasonable, and
Yes.
not to conflict against what the tour does, unless the tour is going to sponsor you and say, all right, we're going to share this money with you. Then you say, I gotta survive and make a living. And in a lot of ways, even in a lot of sports, the people's sponsorship deals and off the field or court money is far superior to what they can earn on the court. And I assume in the beach volleyball world, that's similar.
Yeah, very, very much so. Very much so.
Because you think about how much money like Michael Jordan made, but it was nothing compared to what he did all with Gatorade and the sneakers and McDonald's and movies. It's crazy to think the amount of money that they're making. And so if you start to look at the richest athletes in the world, you'll look at this list and you'll be like, really? There's a lot of soccer players up there because their contracts are crazy, but a lot of people with their endorsements are just off the charts.
Right. You might find like a Formula One race car driver up there that your average sports fan like us, maybe, well, I've heard of that guy, but what does he do again? It's like, oh my God. And it's probably an order of magnitude, Matt, from what like Michael Jordan earns from his brand partnerships as he did, from his salary as a professional basketball player. So
what's the ROI? Cool. I mean, they're tracking ROI on this stuff.
Yeah, there's actually a company in San Diego, I think it's called Hook It, that actually calculates social media engagement. It's sort of a paid service, so we can actually take a report from Taylor Crabb's Hook It and give it to a potential brand partner and say, here's what it looks like if you work with this athlete compared to others in his sport. So that's something that, when I first started doing this was pre-internet. So this is pretty cool, the way that just the agent piece of putting these things together has evolved over the last couple of decades. So many tools now. And honestly, Matt, sometimes I get, how do they do in their events is not the first question. It's more, show me their social media, show me the engagement. Because I got to calculate, if I can't earn my money back in 18 months with an increase in sales, I'm not going to get this past my chief marketing officer type of conversations.
Right. They, it's crazy to me the amount of money people pay for, the influencers, even, for a post. Like some people are getting $1 million a post, or like how do they get back on that? I don't know. But I guess they are. People aren't paying for stuff that it's not worth it. We have this conversation all the time, whether it's naming rights to a stadium or, the team, tournament, teams, players. They're not getting it if it's not worth it for them. They know exactly what they're getting into most of the time. There's extenuating circumstances, obviously.
Yes, and that actually comes up in our negotiations almost every time, Matt, because we always make sure the athletes are aware. Okay, we're not looking for, you may have 8,000 followers. It'd probably be better if you had 80,000, but don't go buy the 75,000 difference. That's silly. First of all, your average consumer is going to see through that pretty quickly. So we're looking for real organic partnerships. Like, just don't take the money because somebody offered you a nice contract, but look at, what are we giving up in terms of exclusivity or a better deal down the road. Don't give up that brand category, especially if you don't like, if you're super health conscious and you would rather have a root canal than drink an energy drink, well, then we don't go try to find you a sponsorship from Rockstar or Monster or Red Bull or any of the others that are out there. So we just try to make it. We always ask the athletes, well, you're brand loyal right now to a lot of things that you may not think about, like, where do you go shopping? Where do you like to eat? Who has your car insurance? Where do you bank? All those sorts of things that, I've been a customer of Chase Bank for 20 years. Okay, so let's talk to Chase Bank. Maybe that's a good opportunity. Or when you travel around the country to your tournaments and you need to rent a car, well, where do you rent a car from? So they may not, give us a sponsorship dollars, but maybe Southwest Airlines would give us 1 million frequent flyer miles for you in exchange for social media and a logo on a temporary tattoo at the Manhattan Beach Open. So those are kind of the fun, creative things we can do.
I like that. And it's an interesting point because what percentage of athletes or actors or anyone in the public realm are actually a big supporter of the stuff that they're pushing? I think it's not that high.
What comes to mind is, does Matthew McConaughey, as much as I'm a huge Matthew McConaughey fan, do you think he really drives a Lincoln? I go, he might. I don't know. I've never met him. I've never seen him around town, but
does Tiger drive a Buick? I guess we know what car he drives, right? Because
yes, we know the last car he drove.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting to me. And so that's why, with the influencer and you're paying for people to pitch your product, it's like, is Tom Selleck really a big fan of the reverse mortgage? Is that, whatever it may be, I wouldn't pay someone to pitch my product necessarily. You'd want to be like, hey, I love this, so I'm going to use it. But I understand there's value in it depending on what it is.
I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure I want Joe Namath consulting with me on my my Medicare choices. With all due respect to Joe.
No, So I don't know. It's interesting how the consumer doesn't care, which is the bottom line.
That's true. Some of the other things we think about a lot too, Matt, are some of the brand categories that they may not, just pop off the list at you. But I remind the athletes, I think it's the second largest sports marketing media spend of any industry is insurance. They go, really? And I go, okay, last time you watched a sporting event, count how many times you saw Progressive, Geico, State Farm, Farmers.
Legal stuff too.
Yeah. Who's the one with the emu? Liberty, the emu?
Yeah.
So those are everywhere.
And legal too. Lawyers are always sponsoring these local tournaments. It's that's who's sponsoring, and there's enough of it. And there's, it's look, I don't know. I love the commercials. Some of them I find annoying. I'm a guy who's going to go probably to the best deal, for that. But that's there are people who are loyal to certain things, like a hotel, like a car, like an airline. I have my preferences, but I just booked a flight to Arizona for August. I went on Southwest. It's the only one who goes nonstop. I like Southwest. I went up to New Jersey. I flew home on United. The next time I go, I'm flying on JetBlue because they had a better deal or a time. So there are people who, who are loyal to brands. And that brings a good question about branding. And my sister was talking to my sister yesterday about brands. Like, what brand do you really identify with, and what's your favorite brand? And then kind of think about why. It was hard for me to think of, me, Nike. It's possibly Nike. Most of the stuff I have is Nike. I just grew up Nike, and I don't know. That just kind of seemed like the athletic thing to do. And then you have an athlete jump from Nike to Under Armour, and it's like, all right, now this is the next best thing. What is it for you? What brands do you find are like your brands that you think of that have give you a strong feeling or connection to?
Especially if we want to kind of frame it in the beach volleyball space, Matt, it's a lot of the athletes look at who the high profile athletes work with, and they see Red Bull, they see GoPro, they see Oakley. But some of those brands really don't need an agent like me to bring an athlete to them. I mean, they have a pretty robust budget. They can go find who they want to work with and just get that done. For me, a lot of the brands that I have become familiar with just through doing business with them and getting to know their management teams and so forth are not the big ones. I have my go-to eyewear brand is a company out of Venice Beach, right where I grew up, called Breakwater Shades. It's just They've done some really, really cool stuff on the AVP first level, which is the community outreach arm of the AVP, doing some youth events around the country and so forth. So that was a fun partnership for me to put together. Like on the apparel side, there's a company called Kauai Bikini that the younger women just absolutely love, but that's kind of their niche, is the high school getting into college age player who are like hoping to earn themselves a college scholarship.
Yeah.
But you don't see too many women pros wearing Kauai Bikini. That's just not their niche. But some of the bigger brands like a Lululemon or somebody like that is actually got a deal with Team Canada, for example. So all the Team Canada athletes will wear Lululemon, those sorts of things. So,
But so is Taylor. So how does that? I mean, you could just sponsoring multiple teams in. How does
yeah.
that work?
So on the Olympic side, I'm not sure about how those potential conflicts get sorted out, but I think the apparel brand for the U.S. Olympic team is Adidas. So I believe if when they walk in the opening ceremonies and so forth, they'll all be wearing the Adidas gear.
I remember there
And
was a thing about the Dream Team, and there was conflicting. That was
yes,
the thing in the Olympics. I don't remember who it was, but there was some conflicting thing with what they were going to wear on the podium.
yes, and that's why. Thank God I have an attorney as a partner. We let him handle that sort of stuff. But uh, yeah, some of those brand loyalties for me on the beach side, I mean, like Breakwater Shades is kind of my go-to for eyewear, but I tend to gravitate away from some of the real big brands, and try to find some of the conversations that I had with the athletes. I mean, if you work with Red Bull, for an example, they have an incredible sports marketing budget, and they have a huge roster of international athletes from all kinds of disciplines, including the action and lifestyle, extreme sports as well, obviously. But on the flip side of that, if you work with Red Bull, you're another Red Bull sponsored athlete.
Right.
If we find an up and coming, a juice company out of San Diego that has a sports marketing budget and wants to get into the space, and we think it's a good move, and we put together a nice mutually beneficial contract, partnership, sponsorship, then you're now the face of that brand in the beach volleyball space.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. So ultimately, it comes down to what are we looking at in terms of a contract, some monthly support, or is it a pay per post type of situation for social media? So the more value we can create from those brand deals, that's typically the way we'll lean. And that's why I'm very, very grateful to have an attorney with legal oversight on all the deals I put together. He says, "Well, let's think about it this way."
Yeah.
This is,
That helps.
he looks at it. I'm looking at it from someone who spent 40 years on the sand with these folks' perspective, and I just call it. He's got Overwatch. He's just kind of okay. That one was written by attorney. Let's make sure that we spend a lot of time scrutinizing the small print on this deal so we don't sell out a category for something that should have had another zero on the end type of oversight. So thank God for Kurt.
Yeah. What do you know much about foot volley? It's becoming pretty big down here in Fort Lauderdale in the South Florida area. Now they have a tour. It's a fascinating sport to watch, obviously. Um,
Yes, I actually worked. Oh gosh, this is I want to say maybe 2015 and 16. I helped out the California Foot Volley Association with their U.S. Championships event, which is at Huntington Beach. And it was pretty cool to just watch the people passing by the event. They thought at a distance it was a beach volleyball tournament, and then they saw what these guys and gals were doing, like jumping up and kicking the ball over, and like, oh my God, this is like super cool. So at the end of the thing, we had people like lining up on the Huntington Beach Pier, looking down on top of what was going on. So that was fun. Yeah, so I did that for a couple of years. The California Foot Volley Association.
Yeah, sir,
And
I got to get down and watch it. Sergio is the CEO of the Florida Foot Volley Tour, and they have some good stuff going. I think it's on television somewhere. I don't know what TV, but hopefully we'll have Sergio on here to talk about foot volley. It's if you're soccer, right? A lot of people were Colombian or South American, Brazilian. They were the people those people were playing on the beach, and I guess it kind of grows from there. The good thing about having, that type of league is you have 2 players or 4 players on a team. You don't have to have that many elite players, right? Even in the volleyball, if you had 30 or so elite players, that's enough to have a very competitive tournament or league.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. I remember the group here. They were based in Orange County, but the 2 guys that kind of ran the thing. One of us, Gio. Giovanni. I call him Gio. He was from Rome, and then his partner was from Brazil. But they ran their business in Southern California. And one of the guys, I remember, he won one of the big events I worked with. He was his mother was Brazilian, and his father was Argentinian. So they had kind of an internal conflict there with, I guess, those on the football, soccer side. Those 2 countries kind of go at it pretty good. And then I think he played maybe a year in the MLS, hooked on with one of the soccer teams. So he was actually just a very, very gifted athlete. And then he started modeling, and then his girlfriend was Letitia Buffoni, who at one time was the most highly sought after women's professional skateboarder. So there's just a really cool juxtaposition of fun sports going on at the same time. I go, hey, this is all right. This is kind of fun, a fun space.
Yeah, I like those sports that aren't the traditional sports, especially in the Olympics. They're going to have 3-on-3 basketball in the Olympics now, which the USA hopefully can do well at. And I would say the beach volleyball kind of falls into that, even though volleyball is more of a mainstream sport. But the beach side, I find it more fun to watch than the regular volleyball, and I think that's fun to watch too. I always watch that sport. I think it's fun. I'm not very good at it. I'm not bad for someone, but I'm like 6'4", but I can't jump that high. So I'm not I can't really spike the ball too much. So I got to rely on my other skills.
There you go.
Yeah. What's your Mount Rushmore of Olympic athletes? Let's go there. The most impressive
on the beach volleyball side.
Yeah, let's do that.
If we want to limit it to, let's just kind of, since Mount Rushmore's in the United States, let's just talk about U.S. players. I'd say if we want to take 2 per gender, I would say we talked about, I think, all of them a little bit. Carrie, on the men's side, for sure. I believe that internationally, he has won more beach volleyball tournaments than anyone ever. And he's also won 2 gold medals as an indoor volleyball player. So you can make the argument he's the best ever beach player and the best ever indoor player.
He's certainly the most recognizable too.
Yeah, certainly. And we used to, because when he was playing on the UCLA team, I think one of the tours they went to Japan. So we would tease Karch. I mean, other than like walking around campus or around Westwood, he could walk through downtown LA and be anonymous. But as soon as he got to Japan, everybody recognized him. Just like, he's just Karch. In our sport, he's Mount Rushmore. St. John Smith, I would say, would be my candidate for Mount Rushmore on the men's side as well. And one of the things that people don't know about St. John, in many instances, is that he was very involved in the international growth of the sport. So he essentially represented the United States when the FIVB was formed, which is the international governing body for beach volleyball. And he was key in getting the growth of the sport internationally and to become an Olympic sport. St. John and his partner took the silver medal in Atlanta in 1996 when it was, and I think they call it an exhibition sport, maybe like surfing is going to be in Tokyo. But St. John took that silver medal in Atlanta. So all the growth of the sport, you can kind of go back to that one guy and say, he was key to getting us where we are today.
And
On
then
the women's
Carrie,
side,
Carrie and Misty.
yeah, I would say it's tough to argue against 3 gold medals as a team. So,
Yeah. How would Karch and St. John do in today's game?
That, again, a really, really good question, Matt. The rules have changed significantly since those guys played. It's a smaller court now. And then with some of the rule changes, it basically lends itself now more to a power, tall person's game. Karch and St. John are each about 6'3", so they weren't really dominant at the net, but both fantastic athletes, could jump, had every shot in the book.
Yeah.
I would say they would be extremely competitive against today's top players, and that's just a fun thing that you see some of the old school volleyball groups on social media always go back and forth. Okay, who wins between Karch Karai, and they actually played as partners for a while.
Right.
We pick Phil Dalhouser and Taylor Crabb. How would they do against Karch and St. John in a dream match? Is like we just have fun with that sort of stuff. So I
They
would
probably
say those
still
two would be
play.
extremely competitive.
They probably could still play like some of these guys, I assume, but
Yes.
yeah, maybe not. Maybe not as competitive. We'll get you out of here the same way we get everyone else out of here. We have you can pick one person to spend the day with. They have to be living. You can't be related to them. Who are you going to pick, and what would you guys do? And we're going to put it on a list, and we're going to try and make it happen for all of our. Trying to make it happen for our guests. We've had some interesting answers. It could be doesn't have to be sports. It could be anything, acting, public figure, just one person.
Well, I would say my first choice would be Elon Musk, but let's kind of put a reality check on that. I'm going to say Lee Steinberg.
Lee Steinberg. I was just talking about him the other day. I invited him to come on the Wolff Den. He actually sent me a happy birthday message on LinkedIn, and I don't know if it was him or his team, but it was just a weird thing to do because I'd reached out to him before, and I'll have to mention that on my next outreach to him to watch the end. That you'd like to meet Lee Steinberg. What would you guys do? I mean, he's fascinating the way he has been able to kind of, I don't want to say corner, but to be such a big time agent for so many big time athletes where you think, well, how am I going to get my share of Lee? Right.
Exactly.
Like time and energy and caring, but he keeps doing it. And it's why he's one of the best.
Yeah, he has pretty much of a defined formula. I've always considered him a mentor in a lot of regards, Matt, although I've never met him in person. We've corresponded, social media. He was kind enough to send me an autographed copy of his book, The Agent, which I've read multiple times. Just, wonderful, kind, giving human being, quite a bit older than me, but he went to kind of a rival high school of mine. So one of his original partners was Warren Moon, who was a year ahead of me in high school, that a lot of my buddies from school played football with in college. So there's kind of that like a big plate of spaghetti. So I feel like I'm sort of connected to Lee, and just everybody loves a good comeback story. And I'm just rooting for that guy to get back to, and he's kind of back to where he was when he was representing Steve Young and Troy Aikman and all those number 1 draft pick quarterbacks. So
He's on the list. He's on the list. We're going to share this with him. Check out kbasports.com. Taylor Crabb on Instagram, tkrabs, 2 B's and an S. Rooting for him and all the U.S. players, but specifically for Taylor to get qualified for the Olympics. That's obviously the biggest stage in the world for any sport, is to be an Olympic athlete, and you become an Olympic champion opens up the doors for a lot of endorsements and partnerships. So we're wishing Taylor the best. Great to have you on here, and we hope to hear some good news from you in the coming weeks.
I'll keep you apprised on all this Olympic qualification stuff, Matt. And thank you so much for having me on. I was looking forward to it and really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. We'll talk soon.
All right. Be well.
Bye.
Thank you.